and welcome to this pharmaphorum webinar in association with Axtria, where we're going to be looking at customer engagement and pharma's field force future. My name's Dominic Tyre, and I'm pharmaphorum's interim managing director. Now, as we know, how healthcare professionals prefer to engage with pharma companies has been changing for quite some time, but the digital transformation that COVID has brought to society in general has dramatically accelerated that. So on this webinar, we're going to be discussing how the right field force training and execution, in combination with the appropriate technology, can help to transform this field force engagement model. Now, as you can see on the screen in front of you, our panel today are Axtria's Vandana Singh, Steve Green from Takeda, Novo Nordisk's Manvendra Singh, Danny Lebrecq, who's an independent advisor and consultant, and Sanofi's Melchior. So, before we kick off proceedings in full, just a few housekeeping points to run through with you. First of all, we've got some slides just a handful of slides that we're going to share some data with you, and then we'll have all of our panel on camera for the roundtable section of today's webinar. If you are a Twitter user, we will be tweeting along to the webinar from our @pharmaphorum Twitter account, and you can follow us there using the hashtag #PPWebinar. Now, you can send us questions at any time during this webinar, and you can do that by clicking on the questions button, of course, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can in the time available. So please do send us through your questions. We are also recording today's webinar, so an archived version will be available shortly after we finish the live event. So if you wanted to review the discussion or the data, or you thought one of your colleagues would benefit from listening in, we'll have a link ready for you shortly after the live event finishes. So now, before we move into this first handful of slides, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Vandana Singh. She has over 20 years of experience in various strategy, operations, and analytical roles in the pharmaceutical industry, and she joined Axtria from Bristol Myers Squibb. And during the BMS Celgene integration, led insight generation and recommendations for rebranding BMS. Before BMS, Vandana was at Sanofi, working in field force effectiveness roles, and before that was at ZS Associates for 5 years. So, Vandana, over to you.
Thank you, Dominic. Hello, everyone. As Dominic mentioned, I will be just laying the landscape here a little bit, and then we will get into the panel discussion. So, what I wanted to cover was very broad, how the pharmaceutical commercialization has been evolving over the years, which for many of us who've been in the industry, we are aware of it. So there have been multiple environmental forces that have forced us to evolve and innovate. It's the access to HCPs has been reducing over a period of time. Their preferences have been changing. Payer pressures and policy uncertainty across the globe in various markets. Industry portfolios have been shifting as well to specialty care. So the old way of operating with the primary care model is no longer as relevant. We see an increase in customer consolidation in various markets across the globe. Even in the US, for example, with the IDNs playing a bigger role now in terms of decision making. We see now patients also playing an increasing role in terms of, thank you. Yeah, I lost a slide there. So we see patients playing an increasing role as well. We also see technology, just like any other industry, technology and AI also transforming healthcare, right? So as a result of that, what has happened is the commercialization, we are seeing some of the impacts there. For example, we see new types of field roles being created, and we'll talk about that a little bit more during our panel discussion as well. We are seeing trend, a more focus on personalized omni-channel marketing and increased emphasis on patient centricity. Um, there's a lot more focus on evidence generation through analyzing data, real world evidence, and then bringing value to your customers also, right? And talking about pricing, which is value based. There is also an increased focus now on breaking down silos. Now, whether it could be silos between sales and marketing, or silos between access, commercial, and medical in field roles, or even silos between R&D and commercial when it comes to bringing new therapies to patients, right? So a lot of the traditional norms are now being questioned and reshaped as we speak. And of course, there's an increased focus on making decisions using data. More and more companies are investing in technology and infrastructure to enable data-driven decision making in their organizations. Now, this has been going on for some time, right? This is not new. What has changed is with COVID is some of these trends have been accelerated, right? So what we have observed because of our role in healthcare consulting, where we work with various clients across the globe, what we've been observing is that the access to physicians, right? So even during COVID, has reduced. So even though pharmaceutical companies have deployed various ways of reaching customers using multiple channels, we are aware of many companies who rolled out, almost all pharma companies rolled out Viva Engage, and then reps were now beginning to interact with customers using other means besides face-to-face. Despite that, that reach to customers wasn't as high as pre-COVID, right? What this also shows is that it's not, going fully virtual is not going to be as impactful as a blend of face-to-face and virtual as well. Because if you have those existing relationships with customers, then you are able to engage with them in a more, they're more willing to then engage with you in a digital, on a digital platform as well, right? What we also observed is that while there were multiple channels that were used to reach prescribers, we observed that phone calls seemed to be the best way to reach prescribers during COVID. But then it was still a blend, right? Face-to-face would be preferred if we were able to go back to the customers. Now, even there were variations. What we saw was that accounts were more restrictive during COVID to face-to-face conversations compared to physicians. And even for physicians, specialists were more restrictive to face-to-face conversations compared to primary care. So there were all these variations we were seeing, right? And all of this is pointing towards, again, knowing your customers' preferences, understanding how you can engage with various customer types. So it's not, you can no longer have a one-size-fits-all model in terms of customer engagements, but how do you understand your customer needs and then orchestrate your interactions with those customers accordingly. What we also observed during COVID was many companies did try to do that by rolling out some form of a multi-channel activity plan, right? So in our benchmarking study, at least 44% of companies said that they are rolling out multi-channel activity plans, and there are several more who are thinking about it and considering it for the near future. The reasons for that varied, whether it was to create a competitive advantage or it was purely because of COVID, they felt that they needed to provide some data-driven insights to their reps. So to enable the reps to engage in a multi-channel manner with their customers. Or it might have been part of an ongoing strategy which they had for next best action. And then this was one element of the strategy. But there were also companies that were hesitating or were not able to roll out multi-channel activity plans And the key reasons for that was because they felt that they didn't have good data to to roll out a multi-channel activity plan, or simply because they felt that the reps can make their best decisions and they didn't want to be providing that kind of guidance from headquarters to them. Okay. What we've also seen is, besides the multi-channel activity plan, in the past year, there's been a lot of impact on sales operations in general, every aspect of sales operations. So in terms of segmentation and targeting, new segmentation methodologies have been considered, where customer preferences are being incorporated in terms of figuring out which customers to target using what channel. And then, of course, there's a shift towards dynamic targeting as well. In terms of the Salesforce size, structure, and alignments itself, we have seen many more new types of roles being considered, whether it's a hybrid CAM and rep, traditional calling on HCPs, and those kinds of roles, or roles focused on patients, or roles focused on distributors, and so on. In terms of call planning, I think we talked about that already, where companies have rolled out multi-channel activity plans and are continuing to evolve that in combination with dynamic targeting using AI/ML. And so there are, either proof of concepts being considered, or some companies are already deploying suggestions to their reps in combination with a multi-channel activity plan that's rolled out at the beginning of the cycle. And then, of course, the impact of all of this is that, none of this would be successful if you didn't adapt your IC plan to motivate the reps in the right way and to adopt these new behaviors and new strategies. So there are some elements of these being incorporated in incentive comp plans as well. Again, when we what we saw in our benchmarking study across customers was, during COVID, greater than 45% of our customers mentioned that they significantly invested in omnichannel orchestration capabilities in the past year, right? So this is where we are saying, even though these trends have been there for a while, in the past year, though, there is this increased focus, increased dialogue, and this a lot of activity in this area. And then there are others, 27% of the companies that said that they at least rolled out some sort of a multi-channel plan or started incorporating multi-channel engagements in their marketing budgets, but they may not have significantly invested in omni-channel orchestration capabilities. But again, they are getting on that journey as well. So far, we've been talking about the impact on operations, looking at a very headquarters view. But then, not to forget, with all of this, the sales rep as well. There's an increased focus on new behaviors and training for the sales force as well. So the sales force in this omni-channel world needs to be more customer-centric, with knowing their customers really well, understanding their customers' journeys. In this complex world where new types of roles are being created, they need to be able to collaborate with various roles in order to bring the best value to their customers, be very knowledgeable in their interactions with their customers, and then, of course, be able to use the power of digital and technology in terms of them using that to make better decisions and bring value to their customers. So it's almost like reps becoming super reps now by leveraging all these resources that they have access to provide better value to their customers. So with that, I will hand it back to Dominic to start the panel discussion.
Thanks very much, Vandana. So actually, before we do start the panel discussion, we're already getting a number of questions coming in from the audience, which is great. Please do keep them coming. I think probably one we can answer fairly quickly, Vandana, there was a question around the benchmarking study and which geographies it covered. Are you able to share a little bit of information around that, or should we answer that one later on?
No, I can share that. So the one I was just showing is a US benchmarking study that we recently concluded, and we're in the process of rolling out a more global study. But the slides I was just showing were the US study.
That's great. Thanks very much. So in a moment, we will indeed get the whole of the panel back on camera. Before we do, I'd just like to ask you, the audience, a question. So the question that you should see dropping down on the screen in front of you is, what is the most significant step that your organization has taken so far to enable customer-centric rep engagement? So there's a fair bit of detail here, whether it's looking at new customer-facing roles, more multi-channel segmentation, perhaps dynamic targeting, incentive compensation, or more sales training focused on new behaviors. So a fair bit of information there to digest. So we're going to leave that poll question open for a while now, as you consider your thoughts on that. But yes, I would like to now bring back all of our panel. So panel, welcome, and it's nice to be able to see you. So we're going to first of all, we're getting your perspectives on how you see sales rep engagements with customers changing in this post-COVID, or hopefully post-COVID world that we're edging towards at the moment. So I'll use this first section of the webinar to introduce the speakers as well. So let's see if we could have, first of all, Steve up. So Steve, welcome. So Steve has been with Takeda for 22 years and has held roles in sales and sales operations leadership. He also has established experience in all areas defined as sales force effectiveness, and in his current role supports 2 sales teams of around 800 representatives. So with that in mind, Steve, what changes do you see taking place with regards to sales rep engagements with customers at the moment?
Well, thank you, Dominic. At the moment, our biggest challenge is contacting our most important HCPs, and I think everybody here in the U.S. is experiencing the same thing. COVID restrictions have changed the world that our practitioners are experiencing. Just think of it this way: parking lots have become waiting rooms because of safe social distancing. So when our rep walks through the door, they're taking up a space that a patient could take up. So I see it this way: the risk of wasting an HCP's time is greater now than it was before. So I've heard a few things here. Value is what we've been focused on, making sure that when we are in contact with an HCP, that the value is there, that they don't feel like we've wasted their time. Our biggest transition has been going from this face-to-face dependent world on having reps that have skills in virtual and telephone, and not only skills but tools. We've had to completely change our model, get the support of our legal and regulatory teams to build virtual presentations and build effective sales presentations for delivery over the phone. So it's been a huge transition. And while we're all looking forward to a time where vaccines allow us to get closer to normal, we're not imagining that we're going to go back to 100% face-to-face. So it's going to be this hybrid world the whole way.
Mm. Well, thanks very much, Steve. So I'd like to bring in next Melchior. So Melchior, welcome to the webinar. So Melchior has more than 25 years pharma experience working across brand management, marketing, sales support, and international and global programs management. His specialties include product management, marketing planning and execution, sales forecasting, CRM, reporting, team building, and advanced analytics and data mining. So a very, very well-rounded skill set there. So Melchior, with those aspects of the industry in mind, what changes do you think the listeners should anticipate in terms of variations by market?
So Yeah, thanks for the question and for the introduction and for the opportunity. Before I answer your question, I first must make a small disclaimer that the position I'm going to express are personal positions and do not necessarily reflect that of my current employer or former employer. But of course, I will leverage my current role and my previous roles to answer the question. So in terms of cultural variations in that space, I think we can really work from the principle that we had before COVID, cultural variations across markets. You certainly did not engage a customer in the same way in the US, in Europe, or in Asia or China. So that was already something that we saw. So I think the challenge that COVID is raising for organizations is that we need to embrace that cultural diversity, but be able to roll out Salesforce excellence processes and customer engagement processes that are, I would say, that you can standardize or industrialize across an entire organization. And that's really something that I believe is more, in fact, I see COVID as an acceleration of this, I would say, management of process rather than something that goes in the way. And for as much as I agree with Steve that access to customer has been a challenge, cultural differences were there before, cultural differences will be there, and we will need to continue to work very closely with our markets to make sure that the global processes that are set at our level in our industry cascade down to real and proper implementation in the market. That's not a new paradigm, but I think COVID has reinforced the need that we need to make sure that we do this right in every setup. So yes, there will be cultural differences in the way I see this being implemented. If I can elaborate on this for 1 second. So take a process of, for example, key account management or a process of segmentation and targeting. You can have, for sure, a global process, but the local implementation, for me, is what makes the big difference. So in our organization, for example, we work very closely with markets to make sure that the global guidances are really cascaded well in this space. And frankly speaking, COVID did not change that. COVID is just an acceleration, and I would say a mindset change for the rep that they need to work differently in that context, yet keeping their cultural differences very well recognized by the organization.
Thanks very much, Melchior. So the next member of the panel to bring in is Man. So a quick introduction to Man Vendra. He is an award-winning pharmaceutical executive with proven leadership skills in delivering outstanding commercial results and change management in emerging and developing markets. Developed markets, I should say. He is also an expert in commercial effectiveness with experience in setting up and running commercial effectiveness departments at both the global and regional level. So, Man, building on Melchior's thoughts there, how would you see rep engagements changing by market?
Dominic, thank you for the question and the wonderful introduction. I couldn't have done that better myself. It's a fascinating question, which I think all of us are grappling with. Just building on what Melchior and what Steve has said, the foundation of what a sales rep does, what a successful sales rep does, is not going to change. There are those cultural nuances and cultural sensitivities which will remain and which we will have to ensure that we pay due respect to, but the foundation part will not change. And what I mean by that is what we see historically also, the reps who are more successful, have a key account mindset. They actually take a holistic customer-centric view, and that is going to continue. COVID-19 has accelerated the technology adoption and has accelerated some of the processes which will be happening 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. But due to COVID, you see a lot more remote engagements, a lot more digital engagements, and the organization becoming more customer-centric. And that is good. We've always talked about being customer-centric, but we have still organized and governed ourselves more from a product-centric viewpoint. If you take particular examples with markets, it is still a very product-centric setup which we have with the field force. Not just my current employer, but previous employers where I've worked, it's still more product-centric. Holistically looking at the whole front line, just not the sales rep, but all functions which touch the customer, how are we going to coordinate our effort in order to get the best-in-class medicines which we sell and which we promote to our patients? That is still going to remain key. COVID-19 has accelerated some of the digitalization of this. Back to you, Dominic.
Thanks very much, Man. So from there, I'd like to bring in Danny. So Danny, welcome to the webinar. A quick introduction to Danny. He's now an advisor and consultant, but he actually spent most of his 30-year career at Bristol-Myers Squibb, leading business teams across multiple geographies. He was most recently Worldwide Vice President of Field Force Excellence and Capabilities at BMS, where he successfully centralized its Field Force training organization and established worldwide capabilities across commercial and medical. So, Danny, as an experienced global commercial leader, how are these changes different, do you think, from approaches used in the past?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Pre-COVID, the approach was clearly to make our field force more efficient face-to-face. That's face-to-face was priority. The rest was really like an add-on. COVID, like my colleague said, it's more like COVID has been a catalyst, which means the face-to-face meeting have been used for, in the past for both relationship building and information sharing or selling. Now, post-COVID, we need to focus on enhance the digital interaction to ensure the efficiency of our field force. And when I say field force, it's not only sales force, it's also the medical team or any interaction, any field person who will interact with the HCP or the customer but we'll make sure we do that in order to deliver value for our customer. I think that's the key. There's no really, the difference pre and post is just the mean. The end result is all about, the value that we will be able to bring to our customer, and that cannot change.
Thanks very much, Danny. So I'll bring in Vandana now. So Vandana, some really interesting perspectives shared with us already. From your perspective, then, how else would you see sales rep engagements with customers changing?
Dominic, I think our panel has covered several points, right? So I would just maybe recap some of those the way I see it. And it's basically our reps being very customer focused, very knowledgeable, understanding their customers, understanding how to orchestrate within their organizations, bring the right resources to the customers, bring the right content to the customers. And so the old way where the rep would just go and just say canned messages to the customer, and the old way of just bombarding the customers with frequency, right? The reach and frequency method may no longer work. Now what we are seeing is the customers are willing to engage with you if you are really imparting some knowledge to them, right? So if they're benefiting from that interaction as well. So that to me is the key difference. We knew that's the way we have to go, but during COVID, out of necessity, out of need, that's where we went, where several pharmaceutical companies, reps, were bringing something of value to the customers, whether it was educational material, whether it was patient services, or whether it was scientific information that they were bringing. But that to me is key in terms of how I'm seeing Salesforce engagements evolving in this new normal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thanks very much, Vanda. So let's bring all of the presenters onto the screen. So we've been in the next section of the webinar. Then I'd like us to look at how the panel sees sales operations processes evolving to support some of the changes that they've outlined. Danny, if we could bring you in first, what sort of operations changes do you think that teams should be considering?
Well, First of all, it should be about customer needs. And it doesn't matter which position you are, but if you really think of field operation, sales force operation, you cannot go away from that. And our industry, though, and I've been in this industry for more than 30 years, and we've talked about customer centricity a lot. And but I don't think we mastered it yet. You know, there's other industry that's been very better than us to do that. Which, if you think of it, customer will want more post, especially right now, post COVID. Our customer will want more immediate and specific information delivered succinctly, in the real time, and on demand. And this will require our industry, but the biopharma industry, to be more flexible in the channels it uses. You know, if you think as a field force interaction or the face-to-face interaction will become an hybrid of face-to-face and virtual interaction, but will have to be also really, or content to increase the importance of relationship. Operation team, the operation team, I think, will need to focus on better profiling and really thinking of better, looking at the profile and segment of their customer base and part of their maybe their digital literacy and communication preferences. They will need to develop the best account management. I heard, I think Steve or Man talking about account management earlier. Yeah, they will need to develop the best account management for the entire field force. Again, focus on team approach and multi-channel in order to engage and deliver value to the customer. And the operation team also will have to start to think of an evolving field role. And I think that's going to be crucial. We're starting to hear about that. Talking, I had a chance to talk to recently 16 different senior leaders in the industry, and that's an area that really they're looking into it, which is new role, new approach, and account management for the entire team.
Well, thanks very much, Danny. So, Man, are there variations by geographical market that listeners ought to be anticipating when it comes to the evolution of sales operations processes?
You always have the cultural nuances which we have discussed. What we have also be aware of is the data maturity which different markets have. In the US, we are blessed that we've got vast array of data, but that's not the case for the rest of the world. And plus, there are sensitivities around privacy laws in a lot of our European markets which we have to adhere to. So that has an impact. Overall, if you look at in terms of guidelines, in terms of processes, we would be able to define what the playground should look like, broad brushstrokes, but you'll have to allow the markets to tweak that. Then there's a technology stack which you use. Example, you've got China where WhatsApp and other email is not prevalent. It's WeChat and WeCall. So how do you plan and anticipate for that? If you look at holistically, it has been a world where you've got a lone ranger going out and hunting, and now it's going to be a team sport. So now when it's a team sport, who owns the customer? Who has got the ownership of the customer, and thereby, what attributes of the customer do we need to collect? Once you've got that in place, then how do you coach the collaboration piece? It's not been inbuilt and inherent in our sales force. Again, we've been lone rangers. We've been hunters out over there. Now, all of a sudden, it's a team sport. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not trying to call my customers hunted, but we need to cater to their demands. We have paid a lot of lip service to customer centricity and patient centricity, but we haven't lived up to it. When you talk to your customers, are you talking only from a sales perspective, or are you talking from a full frontline perspective? So how do you then train your people who are developing content for the customer? And last but not the least, are we really truly listening to the customer? Will it still be the push model, or will it be a pull model? And that means that not only sales operations, but marketing operations behind the scenes needs to change. How quickly do we generate content needs to change. How quickly do we speed up our campaign also will need to change. We talk about different industries as an example. When is the last time you saw a Coca-Cola campaign which lasted for 4 years or for a year? If you go to your nearest grocery store, how long does a campaign last? In the US, you go to a Safeway or Kroger's. In Switzerland, where we are, you go to a Migros, it's 2 week stops. There's an opportunity to learn from there. We always hide behind the MLR wall that, it's a medical, legal, regulated world. Thank God for small mercies it is. But then we'll have to figure out how to be customer-centric, given the challenges which we face. And that's what we need to develop on. And again, going back to customer centricity, if you're going to reward based on product performance and not customer performance, then how are you going to move away? And that means you need to look at your reward mechanisms also. You'll have to look at team-based rewards versus individual rewards if you want to have more customer centricity in your organization, if you want to have that collaborative approach. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place, but as it's getting triggered in the head. So, but it's still the basics. You're calling on the right customers, right message, right frequency. But now you have to deal with right content, right channel, and right context, and then overlay this with the geographical and the cultural sensitivities. And that's what you have to plan for as you go forward. Back to you, Dominic.
Thanks very much, Man. So Melchior, then, as Man said, an opportunity to change. How do you think geographically sales operations processes should be changing then to meet this evolving new world that we will be facing, that we are facing?
I think you cannot have a one-size-fits-all answer to this. So I completely agree with Man that by and large, the role of the rep will more or less remain the same, that we know that the sales processes are going to have to evolve. Those are very, I would say, classic terms that we've heard for the past 15 years, that the role of the rep is going to change. I think this is the first time that the role of the rep actually is changing. So that's the first thing. Second is that regards to the geographical differences, it depends in which organization you sit. If you sit in an organization that is very centralized, and we have some of those companies in pharma industry that are extremely centralized, it's probably relatively easy for you to standardize sales process because you already have been in that journey. If you're in a decentralized organization where there's a lot of empowerment locally, of course, the challenge is much bigger because you have first to bring everyone to the fact that the journey into better customer engagement, into customer centricity, into needs-based selling is something that is universal and that you need to define central processes in the first place. So I think to a degree, the geographical difference for me is not really I would say, the main driver. The main driver is the type of organization, your local deployment, the way you have implemented those processes in the past, and the culture, your internal company culture behind centralization versus decentralization. That is where you will see the big difference. And also, from a global standpoint, what's the quality of your process? How well has it been engineered and designed to cope with that diversity? Because sometimes, to Man's point, a campaign for Coca-Cola in Norway is not the same as that you have in Cameroon or in Algeria. So the capabilities of these companies is that they can operate at scale, localize, fast. Are we in that situation right now in pharma? I'm not so sure, but that's not a geographical question. It is a question of organization and of agility inside the organization, more so to me. Over to you, Dominic.
Thanks very much, Melchior. So, Steve, then, looking at this through the lens of sales leadership, what's your perspective on this question of how sales operations processes need to evolve?
Well, listening to my esteemed colleagues here, the thing that sticks out in my mind is that value that the rep can deliver by whatever channel. We got to make sure that we're focused on the need of that HCP and delivering care to their patients. I know that historically we've been very good at telling, getting out there and broadcasting our message, the message we want to get across, and we've done it by brute force in the past, just pound that message frequently. But we don't have the opportunity for that frequency anymore. So we've got to get more adept at being customer focused and really delivering on that. So, I look at this and say, we've got to be able to, number one, support the ability of representatives and other parts of our organization and deliver to the customers by whatever channel they'll accept it, which, it's been interesting to see during COVID, they've come a long way. If you looked at this a year and a half ago, almost no one was trying to reach an HCP over the phone. And when they weren't very successful. And our customers have come a long way, and they're actually engaging with us that way. Viva Engage, geez, who thought that would be a remarkable tool? And it's helping, it's changed them. But we have to be able to support that. But at the same time, and we've taken steps in this manner, give our reps a clue of what the doctor's preference is. And that's a gap right now that we really need to get focused on. What data is out there to help us understand what that doctor's preference is, so we're delivering in the channel that they will find most useful, most acceptable to them. So there's a lot of work being done there. And again, Danny set us off on this path, and I think it's exactly where we need to be. Are we focused on the needs of the people that we're trying to call? And I think when you do that, you'll have more success. So.
Thanks very much, Steve. So, Vanda, any quick points to add to this section of the discussions?
No, I think all the panelists have covered all the relevant points. The only thing I would add is I've seen companies doing things. Some companies are doing it well, and some companies are doing it in pockets. This journey towards customer centricity. So having that clear vision of where they are going, and then looking at it end to end, where like how Man was articulating, looking at all the way from segmentation all the way to incentive comp as well, right? So if you don't look at all aspects of your sales operations in terms of promoting this customer centricity, then you may not be able to achieve the desired results. So that is something that I would like to emphasize a lot more, because if you're just implementing one thing, like we've heard companies say, we rolled out next best action suggestions to the reps, but the reps are not adopting that. But that was just one element you rolled out and nothing else around the rep changed. Right. So I think when you're looking at sales operations processes, take a look at it holistically, and then, have a clear vision of where you're going. Yes, you will implement one thing at a time. There will be a test and learn approach, but having that clarity on what the vision is and where we are headed is very important as well.
Thanks very much, Vanda. So very shortly then, we're going to get on to the final segment, certainly for the roundtable part of this webinar, where we will essentially be looking at, well, what next? How do companies get started if they're looking to take more of an omni-channel approach? So now, before we do that, we're just going to end the first of our audience polls. So we'd asked you, what's the most significant step your organization has taken so far to enable customer-centric rep engagements? And really quite a mixed bag of responses there. Slightly out in front with 28% of the votes when pressed, of course, to say just pick one of those answers. 28% of you said that your organization has taken steps towards multi-channel segmentation, targeting, call planning. And then the second In second place was sales training, focused on new behaviors, with 24% of the vote, and with 22% of the vote, you said that your organization is looking at new customer-facing roles or hybrid roles or virtual reps. So quite a diverse response, really, to how companies are approaching this new landscape. So to build on that, and before we switch over to, again, hearing more from our esteemed panelists, I do have another poll question from you. So the one that you should see dropping down on your screen now is, if we could ask you to pick just one key hurdle you think your organization has overcome on this journey towards omni-channel operations, whether that's getting commitment from senior leadership, removing organizational silos, having a consolidated and integrated view of data, more on the technology or know-how side of things, or maybe it's acquisition training for skilled omni-channel sales reps. So we'll leave that poll open again for you to vote on. And whilst you, the audience, consider your responses to that question, the question for our panelists next is, well, as I say, is what next? Is how should companies get started moving towards an omni-channel approach? Steve, if we could turn to you first for this question, what do you think companies should be considering as first steps?
Well, I can speak from our perspective. What we did at Takeda, we partnered with quite a few organizations out there that allowed us to gather some data that led us down a path where we felt like we could better understand the preferences of our customers. Industry level access data, some footfall mobility data, things that we were looking at patient flow, and then we have some pretty good analytical minds, and they did some work in some predictive modeling, and we've ended up with some segments that here's a group of docs that seem to be more interested in some of your virtual or electronic means of communication, and here are some of more of your traditional. So it's yet to prove itself out, but it's a first step. I think you need to understand your customers. So we dug deep and tried to find data that would let us do it. With the help of Axtria, we've been putting out an effort plan that our traditional effort plans were based off of response curves and response modeling and such. And here we've been able to allocate it out, not only in face-to-face, which would have been our old model, but here's based on the preference data that we have, how many calls should be in a virtual mode and how many should be phoned. Your poll question, the biggest hurdle we had is getting the reps out of their old face-to-face mode. So we've been doing a lot of efforts to train and inform and encourage to the point, man will be proud of us. We changed our incentive plan so that there would be some reward for them in adopting these new methods. So, I wish I were sage enough to give you one bullet that answered this, but it isn't that easy. It's a complicated problem, one that we've been faced for years, and COVID's forced us to be a little bit more agile in addressing it. But customer preferences are changing, and many of those are because they can't afford to let us through the door. But they've said to us, engage with me this way. And it hasn't been that overt. It's not like they reached out to us and said, hey, in the future, do this. So we've had to go and dig and try to figure that out. And it'll continue to evolve. But I think, I hate to beat a drum here, but I think there's data that's out there that'll let you understand to some degree what your customers are at least preferring. Now, that preference needs to be balanced with, is it effective? So we need to understand if someone is only seeing people through, one Viva Engage a quarter, and you're not moving the needle, maybe preference isn't the only thing that you need to take into account with that HCP, but we're trying everything we can in that regard. So I think data and that focus on understanding where they'll meet us is guiding us right now.
Thanks very much, Steve. So, Danny, as we heard there, probably not one single step to solve this conundrum, but in terms of global commercial operations teams, what do you think they should be aspiring towards?
I think they should be aspired to be the backbone of a team, not only be the only team of supporting the sales force or the field force, but be part of a team with the marketers and focusing on customer centricity. I think that's, for me, they have to aspire to something, is to be the team, the operation team has to be the backbone. Assess the infrastructure and determine what digital capabilities are needed, and voice that within the organization to better organize and support the field force. What Steve just mentioned, we think about it, new metrics, all those new channel and the way to operate, new metrics are going to be needed to assess outcome of innovation or innovative customer engagement. And the company must be innovative in how they measure the quality of interaction with the HCP, which means this operation team will have to be able to articulate that and bring that back to within the organization, marketing, and the other group to be able to say, we need to ensure that the digital resources that we are investing in right now, they provide, or they are provided, are seen as a valuable new channel. I think that's where, if you look at what the operation team, global team, should focus on, is to be able to use or measure all the new approach and new engagement approach, and be able to support the entire organization, not only the outcome for the sales force or field force, but also within the organization. And that should be key to stay focused on customer centricity. If not, it'll be back to the same thing, and that's not going to help.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Danny. So, Melchior, then, if we need the operations team to be the backbone running behind how do you enable that at a global scale?
That's a $1 billion question, but it's relatively easy to answer, in fact, because if you're really serious about this change, this needs to become the #1 priority in your organization. That's where it starts from. So I'm very lucky to be in an organization where that mindset change has already happened. So the question of scale enablement is only a question of the means to an end. But the end is defined. The priority are set. The focus is there. It's communicated. If you look at my current company, latest communication to the investor, the plan is there, and it's really serious. It's not just a piece of communication. It is really about changing the DNA of the company and making this the priority for this part of the organization where I'm sat right now. So from that perspective, the scale enablement is only a matter of the number of people that you throw at the problem, the quality of their thinking, the systems to the point that has been made that you enable, which is no longer a challenge. Systems are no longer a challenge, but most importantly, managing the customer acceptance of that new model and making sure that you are connected with the customer when you make that change. But frankly speaking, the question of scale there are plenty of processes in pharma that are operating at scale right now. If you take your financial processes in all organizations, they're operating at scale. If you take your safety and health environmental management, It is operating at scale. Your industrial affairs are operating at scale in all industry. So why should commercial not operate at scale? I mean, it's just a matter of focus and priority. And I'm very grateful that my current organization is really taking that bold step of saying, this is becoming our DNA, and that's where we are going to go.
Thanks very much, Melchior. So, Man, building on that, then, how do you think the steps for success might differ from when we're looking at different geographies for pharma companies?
Well, the success will not look different. If you are aspiring for a customer-centric organization, then it would be same across the different geographies. How do you get to that journey might be different from one geography to another. Just chiming into what Melchior said earlier, in order to be successful, first and foremost, you need to get your management team aligned. If they are not aligned, then this cannot work at an affiliate or at a market level. The other part which we have to look at is that a lot of these digitalization initiatives have happened in silos, and that's where the data sits and that's where the expertise sits. It's not customer centric, it's more product centric, more activity centric. So how do you fix your company's data model, which historically has been geared towards more product centricity than customer centricity? And last but not the least, we need a long runway for this. The finance nerds in the room, they want an ROI within 3 months or within a couple of quarters. That's not going to happen. These are entrenched models. Rome wasn't built in a day. We need to ensure that we have the patience for these processes to take place. And again, I remind us of different industries. How many times do we go to a bank these days after you opened a bank account? We rarely go, correct? Once you've opened a bank account, that's it. You rarely see your banker. And that change has happened over years. It didn't happen overnight when the ATMs came about in the 1970s. So it requires a longer gestation period. We need to persevere with this. And again, all this is because the customer is not coming out and telling us, hey, this is how you need to approach us directly. They are giving us cues. And there are also cues when they are not happy. You see a lot of access being limited, a lot of customers not wanting to opt in to digital engagements. It's because the engagements which we are providing is rubbish. When you provide rubbish, then they will switch off. We get, in our personal lives, we get a lot of email, a lot of interactions digitally. How many do we open? What's our open rate? And that is what that's where we need to put our customers also in that place. If we demand that of ourselves, we need to ensure that we give that and provide that to our customers. But it all, Melchior, I think, raised this point that what kind of a structure do you have? If you have a federated or a non-federated structure, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure that the top believes in it, because if the top doesn't believe in it, you will not have funding, you will not have the runway, and you will not have the organizational backing to make this change happen. And you need the top to be aligned and top to believe in this, that this is happening. A GM in a market will not have enough money in the bank to fund this over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years period. And for that, you need the top of the organization to be completely aligned and backing this. Back to you, Dominic.
Thanks very much, Man. So, Vandana, just with one eye on the clock, of course, do you have any, I suppose, top tips that companies should bear in mind when they're looking to get started on an omni-channel journey?
Yeah, so I would just say, in addition to everything else everybody said, leadership alignment, having a clear vision of where you're headed. I would also say a test and learn approach, right? So, willingness for some failures along the way as you are going along that journey, and aligned with what I heard Melchior and Man say, right? So it's a long-term journey, and don't start looking for ROI right away. And that you might make mistakes along the way, but that's okay. And how are you shaping the organization and the culture along the way? So that's the additional point I would add to this. Over to you, Dominic.
Okay, thank you very much, Vandana. So let's see. So we'll just end the second of our poll questions there and give the audience a little insight into how their colleagues are thinking. So we were asking you, what's the key hurdle your organization has overcome on the journey towards omni-channel operations? And the key hurdle for 29% of the viewers was, well, both consolidation and integration of data. And then with additionally, also with 29% of the vote, it was removal of organizational silos. So those two things came top. And then a little way down, but still a key hurdle for a number of you, with 21% of the vote, was overcoming or getting commitment from senior leadership on the value of omni-channel, on an omni-channel approach. So some interesting thoughts there. We'll move on now to the answering some of the many questions that you've been sending in. So first of all, thank you for sending those in. Please do continue sending them in, and we will try and get through as many as we can in the time we've got left to us. The first question, and I'll pose this to all of the panel, but please, any of you jump in that want to. The first question is the listener says they like the idea of generalizing the account management based evolution, generalizing it, but can one of the panel elaborate on the role of the MSL and how they are evolving in terms of multi-channel due to compliance? What might be their positioning in terms of being part of a cross-functional team? So panel, the role of the MSL within this, your thoughts on that? Man, please, if you'd like to start us off.
I also saw Dominique say hand up, but I'll take this one. So they play a very critical role. In fact, if you look at equivalence data for multi-channel, you realize that both digital engagements and face-to-face engagements, the impact versus a rep call is much more higher with MSLs. The trouble happens is because of compliance reasons, there is a thick firewall between the commercial side of the organization and the clinical side of the organization. So the question becomes is, if you're going to triage market access, field sales, and then field medical, who takes ownership? And answering my own question, it depends on what the issue is with the account. So in a nutshell, they're playing a more and more critical role. We'll see a lot more of MSLs. Physician traction with MSLs is much more higher. And going forward, you will see this also being impacting also whom we hire as our sales reps. Yeah, folks with a lot more clinical background would be preferred, and then we'll have to coach them on how do you go ahead and train them, and how do they go ahead and sell. But they're playing critical role. The dilemma obviously is that you can't have similar rewards and compensation as you have for a commercial team for MSLs, and that's as Melchior said, it's $1 billion question. Every organization needs to see how risk averse they are and try and sort that out. There are other markers apart from dollar value which can be used to measure their performance and reward them also. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Man. Would any of the other presenters like to weigh in on the role of the MSL?
No, I think I'm not going to repeat what Man just said. I think MSLs are critical. For me, they are field medical, and from that perspective, their access to customer is also challenged in the exact same way, if not more challenging way, because they have to bring scientific news that is late-breaking news, for example, regarding COVID and chronic disease, for example, in our specific case, which is putting them under a lot of pressure because the data is scarce, is very recent, it's very fragmented. So I think for them, as for the medical sales rep, the role of the management, the role of the coaches, the role of the training, the role of all these supporting functions is absolutely essential. So I don't really make a difference between the two. I believe they are part of an ecosystem to address the issues of the account, as Man rightfully said, and we absolutely need to embrace the fact that they have to work in a network and no longer as a solo player as they used to do in the past. So those are my thoughts about this, but I completely agree that it's not just a question of one versus the other. They are both in the same journey at a different pace with a different goal, but they are in the same journey.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Melchior. So moving on to the next of the questions that we've come in. So the question was this: does the panel think that COVID-19 has changed the value, whether that's information or services, asked of the pharmaceutical industry and its field forces? And I suppose, will that change beyond the pandemic?
So, yeah.
Melchior first, then Steve will hand over to you.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Steve. So no, definitely, I think we can see this from multiple angles. So first of all, if you ask your friends and family, who knew Pfizer, BioNTech, AstraZeneca before the pandemic? Nobody. If you used to work for AstraZeneca years ago, and when I was saying I work for AstraZeneca, people look at me and say, "You work for what? What's that company doing?" So I think the value of the pharma industry has tremendously increased for customers, for patients, for buyers, for payers over the past year. Pharma was not seen as a major in many markets, like a major industry in many markets, was considered like something that is a BAU business, but it's actually become the #1 priority of most governments on the planet. So I think this is really something that I believe is essential. And for the sales rep, they are part of that ecosystem now. So people would tell me at the beginning of COVID crisis, oh, it's the end of the rep. Reps are at home and that's it. Well, Melchior, you work on Salesforce effectiveness. What are you doing? You're a man of a dinosaur. But no, it's not true. The rep ecosystem has come out of COVID. Challenge, yes, but stronger than ever in my view, because the convincing the customer, bringing added value, and working with the MSLs, this has become they're central in this piece. So I think from a value proposition perspective, from a medical, from a commercial space, for customers or for patients, I really see that COVID has changed a lot. I brought actually a lot of, I think, good vibes for the industry, and I don't see that changing unless we go back to very old habits of bringing useless information to customers that don't want to hear us. If we go back to this, then of course we will see the dip again. But if we stay on that momentum, I think the future is bright for the industry and for reps.
Thanks very much, Melchior. And Steve, you're also going to weigh in on how COVID has changed the value asked of pharma and whether that's going to remain beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Melchior said there. I think that, my perspective, we've never seen anything in the industry that's more powerful and persuasive than a well-motivated, well-trained rep. Okay, that has been the essence of promoting our products to benefit patients for as long as I've been in the industry. But the COVID pandemic has put more pressure on us to make sure that rep and their engagement with their customers is of value. In the US, you have to look at it this way and realize that almost every HCP that we call on experienced a decrease in their income last year. They had fewer patients rolling through the door. So they're financially in a different place than they were. So we're seeing private practices acting like IDNs in terms of access to reps. And the way to break down those barriers is to make sure that your engagements bring value, that those HCPs, that they feel like they got something out of that. So I do believe, even though that was a fundamental part of our equation in the past, it's imperative now. Melchior, you're right. If we go back to our old habits, we're going to be sitting here analyzing the effectiveness of sales forces, and the financial equation has changed. And if we're in our old habits, we're going to have a hard time justifying the size of our sales forces going forward. So everybody on the team, and this is a team effort here, has to make sure that interaction with our customers is the best it can be every time. And I think that's what's changed. It's more imperative. but it's in a really good place. So we have an opportunity. Customers are trying to meet us, and we need to do our part.
Thanks very much, Steve. So I think just time for one more question, if we're able to keep the responses fairly brief to this one, but hopefully an instructive one for the audience. The question is, are there lessons that pharma can learn from other industries that maybe have already adopted omni-channel orchestration approaches in the past?
Happy to take it again. Sorry if I'm speaking too much. So no, I think there was some comments made by Man earlier about the banking industry. These guys have been through this 15 years ago. If you remember your experience with banking at the beginning of the online journey, it was terrible. You would go to the branch, you would not know that you would have an account. You would go to the account, you could not see your statements. You could not do a wire transfer on the online. It was crazy. Look at the operating model of the banking industry 20 years after the internet was brought in. It's can you imagine not having your bank account on your mobile phone? We are at the beginning of that journey in pharma. And so for me, the learnings from other industries is essential. And that's what I do with my team. We go to forums, we listen to TED Talks, we talk to partners that we have in other industries, just to make sure that we speed up our learning curve on this. But the examples are right beneath our eyes. Amazon, banking industry, automotive, all of those guys have done this way faster than we have done, and much earlier. But they were under pressure. Now we are under pressure.
Look at Amazon right now. If as a customer, when you reach out, you click anywhere on Amazon and you're looking at something, you're going to get back, email, or next time you're on the internet, you're going to get really personalized message or image because of what you search. I think we're talking about value that we're going to bring to our customer. If we really, our customer right now, this COVID was a catalyst to really change their preferences. They want to have on-demand, information in real time. We're seeing that's also, an industry that we need to look into and better learn, which is looking at AI and machine learning and what kind of message, and to feed that back within our team in order to bring value and reach out after that to the customer. I think we need to look at, banking is very good and really strong industry, and we need to learn from them. But if you look at the digital group, just like Amazon, Google, there's a lot we could learn and also implement within our industry, but it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm. Vandana, some final thoughts perhaps from you before we
just one more industry I wanted to mention is the telecom industry. So when I've been talking to our friends in the telecom industry, and when you make a call to the call center, for example, and the way they describe it works, right? So the customer has information. So the call center rep has information about the customer, and then they're using AI ML. They get guided messages around that time on what to say to the customer. The customer is calling about this. Are you actually engaging with the customer the right way, and so on? And it's fascinating because they've started on this journey 10, 15 years ago, and to the point where now they don't need any managers observing how the call center rep is working, because everything is now data driven and there's metrics, and it's a new normal for them, right? So that's another example of just picking up on what Danny said, using digital and AI and so on. Telecom is another industry that we can learn from there.
Thanks very much, Vandana. So as I say, we are now unfortunately coming to the end of this particular webinar. It's certainly been a fascinating discussion. We've heard that a lot of these problems aren't necessarily new for the industry, but clearly COVID has been an accelerant to concentrate a lot of people's thinking around what could we be doing as an industry differently. We've heard about the critical role that